Great. So let's just start, Vaibhav.
Sure, I am here.
Fantastic. So thank you all for joining us today. This is Karishma Sharma, Marketing Manager, High Counselor, and welcome to the webinar Career in Strategy and Analytics with our guest speaker, Vaibhav Jain, an Operations Strategy and Analytics Manager at Google. So before we move further, I'll quickly introduce you the agenda of the webinar. We'll start with brief High Counselor introduction. Then we'll introduce you to our guest speaker, followed with a Q&A session, which is an opportunity for you to ask questions from our guest speaker. And before we get started, I'll quickly introduce you a few ground rules and information about the structure of the webinar. Today's webinar will have a question and answer round with our speaker, where you can ask questions from him as well. So we are live on YouTube. You can ask questions by commenting in the comment section, and I will convey the same to the guest speaker for you. So you can even share the webinar link with your friends, and you can even like the same. Before we turn it to our speaker, we just wanted to quickly introduce ourselves. We are High Counselor, an online and mobile platform that helps job seekers and students to land into their dream job by connecting them to the employees who work at their dream company. As I'm sure you all know today, getting coaching from a company insider can dramatically increase your chances, not only to ensure that the job you are aiming at is the right fit for you, but also land on your dream job. So stay tuned until the end of the webinar, for we'll give you a lot more information about it. Also, we host such kind of webinars regularly, so please sign up on our platform so that we can keep you posted about the upcoming awesome webinars. Fantastic. So I would welcome Vaibhav on this webinar. And thank you so much, Vaibhav, for your time and participation. We really value that. And we would love to know more about your experience and a professional background. Over to you, Vaibhav.
Sure. Thank you, Karishma. I think first of all, I would like to thank you and High Counselor for giving me this opportunity to be live on this webinar. I think a couple of goals I have from this session. One, we can make it obviously in a Q&A session, very informal. I hope the whole session is useful for people who are watching it, and also for the whole YouTube community. So one of my key goals here would be to share my past experience, my career journey, which is very individualistic in that sense, and share it with you guys and see if it resonates with any one of you, and if you can kind of take any pointers. So yeah, I think we can probably like I can kick it off by giving some idea about my background, where I come from. So starting like from where I grew up. I grew up in India. I grew up in Delhi. Um, so I did my engineering and computer sciences. And this is like back, I would say like almost 14, 15 years back. I did my engineering and computer sciences, came to US in 2004 for my master's, and that master's was in management science and engineering. So I did my MS in MSNE here in Bay Area, and have been here in Bay Area since last 14 years. My first role, like after my graduation, was actually for a startup. So I worked for a startup for 2 years as a business analyst and there was this company called Efficient Frontier, which was actually later acquired by Adobe. And it was a pretty, like when I joined the company, we were like 35 people. And by the time I left, we were around 200 people. First time kind of like in corporate world in US actually, like coming from India, it was a pretty interesting, I would say, like experience just to be part of the workforce here. Learned a lot. We were like, I started learning a lot about corporate terminologies, language which people use, how like everything was so new and exciting, I would say in that sense. But 2 years into the role, I was like, my roommate at that time, actually, he said that like, there's an opportunity in finance at Google. Would you like to take it, or would you like to interview for the position? I said, sure, why not? Like I was starting to kind of like feel the need to challenge myself and do something different. So that's when I kind of like applied to Google, and very like interestingly, I got the offer, even though I did not have any specific finance background. And this opportunity was in FP&A, product financial planning and analysis of the corporate finance, essentially at Google. Again, like something which I hadn't done in the past, but I was up for the challenge. So I started my Google career in corporate finance, was there for 8 years. And then like then I switched to operations 3 years back. So currently, like I am part of consumer hardware operations team. And within the operations team, I lead a small team of data analysts. And we provide customer support analytics. And we can talk more about it later on, like through the questions. But yeah, that's pretty much my story has been. So sure, I think like Karishma, do you want to start?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It was a lovely journey, I must say, and good to hear that you're from the heart of India. So we'll start with the question answer round. So Vaibhav, apart from this, what is your typical day as an operations strategy and analytics manager?
Sure. So I would say like the way I would answer this question is like how, say, operations, my current like consumer hardware operations fit in the broader Google umbrella. So let me start with that, and then maybe I can touch base on specific things which we do at Google.
Sure, perfect.
So Google, I don't know like how many people follow like how Google is trending. So back in the days when I joined, I'm talking about like 2008, Google wasn't as big as it is right now. So we are like 100,000 people now. And I think at that time we were close to maybe 10,000 people. And the company wasn't structured in business units. So we were just like a small company structured by functions. So engineering was one function, product was one function, marketing was one function, finance was one function. So that's how kind of like it worked. And round about like 4 years into my role, Larry Page took over as a CEO of Google and structured the company into business units. So now we are kind of like following that, I would say like that structure. And it's very typical of like how when the company grow to bigger size, they get structured at the business unit level. So I'm part of one of the business units of Google, which is called consumer hardware. And again, like this is a recent initiative from Google where we have ventured into the hardware business. So earlier, like Google had never manufactured devices. This is the first time we are manufacturing our own Google Home devices, Pixel phones. We have like Pixel books. So it's a big, rich portfolio of hardware devices. So I'm part of that bigger team, consumer hardware. Within consumer hardware, there are again like multiple functions, and customer care is one of those functions. So within customer care, the set of responsibilities pretty much are like, if consumers buy our devices, they have certain expectations, they have certain feedback which they need to provide to us, and also like they have, if they run into technical issues with the product or any like warranty related issues or product defects or something like that, so they reach out to our team. So we are the intermediary between the product team and our consumers. So we help kind of bridge that gap. And within that team, my team leads the analytics and strategy piece of customer care. And by that, what I mean is we measure like how effectively we are providing we're providing customer care. And when I say measure the success, that kind of falls into two buckets. One is like measuring the quality of customer care operations. For example, like how happy our customers are when they reach out to us for any help. And the second bucket, I would say, would fall on the efficiency. So Google, again, like with scale of things, we handle a lot of volume. So one of the key goals for any operations team is to make sure that we are providing support in the most efficient way. So those are kind of like two buckets, I would say, quality and efficiency. And analytics team helps in measuring, building the infrastructure, and like associated tasks with that. Some of the things which answering the specific question around like what set of activities does my team do on a day-to-day basis. So one would be we are building the infrastructure, and that infrastructure is so dynamic in Google ecosystem that like you need to keep it updated and keep it like alive. So building the whole infrastructure, which requires a lot of skill sets like data engineering skills, analytical skills, having some kind of like understanding of how things need to be scaled. So that comes into that particular job category. Then we have like the second set of activities include like analytical insights. So we play with lots and lots of data. Someone who has worked at Google or is familiar with Google would know that like we are a data-driven company and we obsess about data. So kind of like capturing this data, analyzing it, and creating insights which can help run the business better is another set of responsibilities we do as a team.
Wonderful. Yeah. That will suffice. So great. So my next question is, Weber, what is the most fun part of your job?
That's a good question, Karishma. Something which I think about myself a lot as well. I would say like problem solving. Google is a highly complex ecosystem with a lot of tools and technologies and stacks and homegrown things. So being able to, as a customer care analytics team, being able to solve the problems and like being able to connect the dots in this whole technology landscape, being able to work with cross-functional teams, being able to get them on board. So it's kind of like a product management-ish role in some ways, but within the analytics framework. Because we are building a lot of things in the infrastructure space. So that's, I would say, like problem solving in a very complex ecosystem where you get intellectually challenged and where you have to test out a lot of your interpersonal skills, social skills as well, is something pretty exciting.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And apart from this, what are the 3 challenges associated with your job position?
Sure. So I would say like one is the volatility in the business. Um, we like in again, like talking specifically about my kind of like group, which is consumer hardware. It's a relatively new area for Google, and we have like strong competition in terms of like Amazon's, Apple's, and Microsoft, and a lot of like the tech kind of big giants out there, and they have been doing this. Like consumer hardware has been core of their business, but it hasn't been core of Google business because Google has mainly been on the software, internet services side. So since it's a relatively new space, the volatility, the change in strategy, the on the spot kind of like directionally business changing creates a lot of I would say like effect on customer support analytics team. So we need to keep adjusting to all the real-time changes which are happening. It could be around a lot of like restructuring in the organization. It could be around a lot of new technologies being thrown at us. It could be around like completely changing the business strategy. So being able to manage this volatility with a lot of like cool headedness, I think is one of the biggest challenges. The second, I would say, like, and this is specific to customer support space, the tools and technology stack is very fragmented because, again, it's a relatively new area within the industry. So you have like some established channels like phone support and chat support, but then there are like other channels like social media, where Twitter support, Facebook Messenger support. So all of those like ways in which customers are now reaching out to their businesses is something very new, and the tools, the space hasn't evolved that much, and as a result, there are like many players, many startups creating solutions. So it creates a lot of like complex, fragmented tools and technology stack, and sometimes like for our team, which is kind of like an omni-channel team which needs to consolidate all the solutions, we need to bring everything together, and that becomes extremely challenging as well. But I think that's where the fun lies as well. So I would say like those two are the key ones, and the third one is like the cross-functional aspect of our role. So we need to work with a lot of teams. Like we touch almost like 14, 15 teams in Google. We rather partner with 14, 15 teams. So being able to kind of like speak the language which they speak, which maybe like you may have to talk to engineering teams. They have their own language. You need to be like really smart when you talk to them in understanding the engineering terminology. But then you may have to like then talk to the sales team. You have to talk to the marketing team. You have to talk to like the product facing team. So everyone speaks their own terminology and the language, and you have to kind of like be updated, and to be able to effectively partner with them, you have to be on the same page as well. So volatility, tools and technology space, and I would say like the cross-functional aspect of the role.
Great. Seems to be quite challenging and interesting as well. So, Weber,
Sure.
what made you stick at Google for more than 10 years?
That's 10 years. I mean, like, it's kind of funny, like when I think about, when I like pause and think about it, it does feel like a long time, like 10. In fact, like I joined Google in 2008, so I'm in my 11th year.
Yeah, 11th.
It is, when you ask me like that, Karishma, it does seem like a long time. But honestly speaking, like it doesn't, when you are like, it doesn't feel like that at all. Like Google is such a fast evolving space, or as a company, and the technology, the pace of the technology and pace of Silicon Valley in general has been, it's so fast that just doesn't feel that I've been stagnant and I've been in one place. Everything feels so new almost. So I would say like the pace of the technology, the cutting edge technology, which Google, the space for Google, which is always like almost at the like ahead of this whole curve, in this industry curve, and keeps you challenged, and that those challenges, I think, like keep you like at Google, I would say.
Great, wonderful. So, how to could you please give us few tips like how to break in strategy roles? Any tips for entry level positions?
So, um, the way I would answer this question is like strategy is like a very it's an overly used word in the industry. First of all, like we need to define what does strategy mean, and like when you say strategy roles, what do we mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, a typical industry like definition is consulting roles, right? So uh, again, like when we say strategy roles, like what kind of strategy roles? If it's about consulting roles, which is the most typical like I would say like role associated with strategy, then for that, I would say like education, basically having like some kind of an analytical background, and then like pursuing some kind of a management degree is probably the best route to um, have a nice break in some of these like top consulting firms. Um, and then that's how kind of like you get exposed to the whole space of strategy or business strategy or structuring the problems. And then like you kind of like build on top of that. So I would say like following the right academic route, if you are seriously thinking about like having a career in consulting and strategy, is probably the way to it should be, at least for the entry level positions. That's how it should be kind of like tackled. Strategy is something which you really become better over time. There is no shortcut as such that like you just kind of like um, become, you join a company and then you become a great strategist, or you start kind of like owning business problems and solving them. So I think like following the right track, which would be I think like having some kind of like going through some rigor which tests and builds your analytical capabilities. So enrolling in some kind of like engineering driven programs, or like even programs which build your analytical abilities, and then like combining that with some kind of like knowledge on the business concept like finance, having a little bit of knowledge about corporate finance concepts, having concepts around marketing, all the functional kind of like knowledge, cross-functional knowledge, and I think like um, and then like also talking to people who have done consulting and strategy would help. So you kind of like typically like in the interviews which post graduation, when you're trying for like strategy roles, then they give you a case interview. That's kind of like the I would say like that the standard which is used across industry. And to be able to ace those case interviews, you need to be able to structure the problem well. You need to be able to structure your answers. Uh, they're not like there's no right or wrong answer for case interviews, but it's more around uh, the interviewer is testing you based on the approach, the framework which you're using. And those I think like come with a lot of practice, a lot of knowledge. Personally, I can say like just reading about the industries, reading about updating yourself with like what's happening in the space helps connect the dot better and helps with the structuring of the problems as well. So I would say those are the few things.
Great. So, what are the two? What are the? I would say not two, three, but what is the most important certification or qualifications, or two, three courses where an applicant can do to strengthen his or her job application for this position?
Sure. So again, like there is no certification when it comes to kind of like business side of the things, right? Like there are two, I would say like um, in strategy and analytics, my team essentially, there are two sub skill sets. One is like the strategy, and there's no certification as such which you can kind of like acquire. Um, for that, I think like I would say again, like just involving yourself in the right ecosystem, which is building your analytical skills which help you structure things well, building the right, I think like attitude to quantify things. So having some kind of like financial background, or not financial, but like being able to play with like a lot of numbers. And for that, like having skill sets in math helps. With some courses in finance definitely help. Like being able to see how the businesses think at a high level. That's extremely important. And then the second piece, I would say, like on the analytics side, yes, you can definitely like take courses or I have certifications will probably again like uh, I don't know, personally I would not go that route, because to if you're taking certifications and spending a lot of money on those certifications, then those certifications need to be really credible in the industry. So if you're kind of like putting those certifications on resume, then they should mean something, they should have some value. If there is no value, if people don't kind of like value those certifications, then you end up wasting a lot of money. Instead of that, I think like I would suggest taking a lot of courses which are relevant in the analytics domain. It could be around strengthening your data engineering skills if you're going that route, or it could be strengthening, say, your statistical data modeling side, or it could be around like data visualization sides. So updating yourself with like a lot of visualization techniques. Uh, so I would say like, again, choose on what you are aiming for. If it is around like analytics, then analytics is a huge domain. It's a spectrum of different skill sets. Pick specifically what you want to do in that spectrum, and then take a lot of academic courses around that. Internet has lots and lots of material, so watch a lot of YouTube videos around that. Build your core skill set, because in the interviews you will be tested on all of those skills.
Fantastic. So my next question is, Weber, what is the best job search approach for entry-level analytics position?
The best route, again, like it depends on if people like if you're just graduating, I would say like the career fairs of schools are the best place to network and find your future employers. Suppose if you graduated and like you are already in the like in the corporate world, and you're trying to make the next move, I would say like reaching out people on LinkedIn who are in the similar space where you worked or you want to work, reaching out to them, kind of like sending out polite, gentle nudges and see if they're interested. I think updating and your LinkedIn profile, keeping it updated also helps. Having a very tight resume, because when you're circulating, when you're initiating conversations, people typically ask for your resume. So having like a very crisp one-page resume which summarizes your story really well, I think helps. On top of all of these, I think like regular things, I would say, if suppose you're not getting many good leads, even like offering like volunteering 20% opportunities, for example, like take some small project in any startup or any of the companies out there, solve the problem for them for free. I would say like just volunteer in in that space, so that you help kind of like assess for yourself the whole analytics, the whole space. And then second, I think like you build relationships and you build credibility, and you get to kind of like just you get a foot in the door. And if they like your work, you have given a demo, and they would be more than willing to kind of like take you in. For
Great.
bigger companies, yeah, and just to add, like for the bigger companies, I would say like established companies like Google or Facebook and all the kind of like, I would say, large tech companies. I know like a lot of recruiters are sourcing people through LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a great way to I think like keep your network alive.
Fantastic. So what are the 3 tips to make your resume stand out for analytics related position?
Okay. So for resume, again, like one thing which I look for in people, and I think like it could be a biased way of looking at it, and I'll give you like the reason why I'm so biased, is one page. Like I feel like if people cannot summarize their accomplishments in one page, then I think like it just kind of like, at least I find it, it doesn't speak uh, that well, like if you cannot summarize, if you cannot quantify, if you cannot like create your story in one page, then that means you lack the ability to structure and concisely state your thing. So that's kind of like my very, very, I would say like biased way of looking at it. But then I was also kind of like brain, I would say like when I was doing my master's, it was kind of like coded in your training, resume training or recruiting skills, that always have one page resume, and they kind of like gave a lot of reasons on why it should be one page. And since then I've kind of like followed that practice, and I kind of like relate to that as well, that like when you're sending your resumes, people just have like 30 seconds maybe to kind of glance through your accomplishments, through your things, and it just doesn't really matter if you create like many pages. People just get lost in details. The idea is to make it very, very sharp, and like it's kind of like elevator pitch essentially, and you just need one page for that. So that's one very, very strong, I think, like suggestion, that keep it one pager. The second, again, like based on a lot of resumes which I have seen all around, I think people don't quantify their accomplishments. So which does not help people get kind of like assessment of what people have done. I think like quantification helps in benchmarking information. So you help kind of like give the interviewer some idea about the scope of the problems you have handled, and that's where quantification helps. So I would say quantification of your accomplishments along with like having one page. And the third kind of like area which is very important for analytics actually, is be very, very honest in what you are claiming you're an expert in. Analytics is specifically one domain where you will be tested a lot in your day-to-day work, and there is no point like lying or misrepresenting that you know X many skills when you actually don't know them. And during the interview, you will be tested on some of the core skill sets. So um, just I think like stating the reality in your resume, being close to the reality is something another I think I would say. So three things, like one pager, quantify your accomplishments, and keep your skill sets honest, I think.
Fantastic. So I really like that one pager tip. So, what are the three common interview questions asked in entry level position interview?
Sure. I can kind of like give you an idea of how, again, like it may differ by team to team, and it can differ from companies to companies. I can kind of give you an idea of how I kind of like structure my interviews when when I'm talking to like entry level positions. So the first one is like, first one, which is kind of very important, is like, uh, I, having a knowledge about the company you are interviewing for. So if it's a public company, I would expect people to know their business model, like how say for example, like Google makes money, and there are like a lot of 10 Qs, a lot of like these quarterly reports which public companies publish. So going through those reports, financial SEC filing reports, which have a very, very, like I would say, like comprehensive assessment of the whole company, the business model, the income statements, also like the risks, the competition. So it kind of like helps you prepare and know your potential target company really well. So really, really kind of like understanding the business model of the company you are aiming for. To me, if somebody does not know where for example, if someone is coming to Google and interviewing and doesn't know Google's business model, where Google is headed, high level strategy, then that's kind of like that this person has not done the work well. So that's one, I think. The second one would be like, typical question would be like, why people are interested in this opportunity. So you can easily, like, I would say, separate people who are mechanical in their answers, and who kind of like, just kind of like reading it from a script, versus people who have thought through, like introspected on why do they want that role. And it could be a very, very honest answer as well. Like if you're not clear, you can always say that, like, this is an early stage in the career, you want to take a lot of challenges, you want to take up, like you want to expose yourself to all of those things. So thinking through on like why you really want that particular role, and being honest to your answer, and being kind of like original and unique in that answer, versus scripting it. That's the second one. Third one, I would say, is like more job related aspect. So there are, like, I would say, three buckets in which we assess people. One is like general cognitive ability, which is, again, like not specific to this particular role, but like how general intellectual ability of an individual, like how smart that person is. And that is, again, like not specific to a particular job profile, but it's just like how people think, how they structure things, how what is the attitude or approach in which they do the problem solving. So it's kind of like tests your thinking ability, like how can you think far, how can you structure things well. The second one, I would say, is like is the job related skill sets, and that's where it differs job by job. For particular analytics roles, depending again within analytics, what spectrum you're aiming for. Is it a data engineer? Is it like more or a statistician, data scientist kind of a role? Or is it more of general analytics role? Or is more of a financial analytics kind of thing? Depending on that, you may be given a case interview around that problem, and you'll be asked to solve that. For more on the engineering sides, data engineering and data science side, you will be given, you will be tested specific to those skill sets. So I would say like general cognitive ability, and then the second one is role related skill sets. So
Wonderful.
if I have to summarize answer, I would say like one, really kind of like researching well about the business of the company or the space the company is in, kind of like understanding it in and out. The second one is really thinking through like why are you interested in the role which you have applied for. Is it just because you're kind of like running away from something, or are you aiming for are you really genuinely interested in something, to do something? So that helps in kind of like creating the passion for the role. And the third one is very specific to the role, to the job, or to the interview process, which is around like testing your general cognitive ability, general analytical skills. The second one would be role related specific skills. And I did not touch the third one, which could be around like the overall attitude of the candidate, which should be like, would, as a potential manager or the team member, would I like to work with this individual or not?
Fantastic. So thank you so much for the answer, Vaibhav. My next question is three things what a candidate should consider while selecting an employer for any position.
Sure. So help me like say it again, like the question.
Sure. Three things a candidate should consider while selecting an employer for any position.
Okay, now I get it. I would say like when you're like, again, this is again a very, I would say, personal advice, and there's no right or wrong answer to that. I can say like what I look for when I am out in the job market or when I'm interviewing. So the first and the most important is the hiring manager. When you are interviewing, like, do you connect well with the hiring manager or not? If you don't, then I would say like that's a kind of like a red flag. The second one I would say is the culture of the company, which is very important for me as well. Having worked at Google, again, like it's well known for its culture. So I do know what a good culture means. And I think like it's again a very softer aspect of the role, that overall in the company how is the culture? Is the culture more towards like short-term thinking, or are people invested in the long term and think long? Like they have the patience and perseverance uh, to kind of like stick and through the bad times, or not even through the bad times, like have the discipline to be a long-term player. And that's where I think like a lot of the culture of the company gets defined. And third one would be, I think like the people, general people like who work in the company. And I think like I would suggest talk to lots and lots of people in the same company. You can always reach out to them on LinkedIn, and people are always receptive to talk to you. If you just kind of like state that you are about to take a position or you're thinking to interview, I think like in Silicon Valley, this is one of the greatest things which I've observed, that people are always willing to help and give back because they themselves have been helped in their own journey. So I think reaching out to people who work in those companies, getting an assessment of like what is the general what's the general recruiting process, what is the quality of people who are getting hired, and does it fit with your expectations or not? So hiring manager, culture of the company, and like the people you're going to work with.
Thank you so much for the answer, Vaibhav. So my next question is, what is the career path of a financial analyst?
Sure. So because I have actually spent 8 years in corporate finance, FP&A, so I can kind of like give a high level idea of like what financial analyst career looks in a tech company. So at a high level, I would say like the best way to understand it is corporate finance. It's very different than kind of like the finance, say iBanking finance or portfolio management or like specific financial advisory services and what like a lot of the roles out there in the industry. So I'm going to talk specifically about like corporate finance role. In any big company or like with a reasonable presence, there are, I would say, 4 specific buckets of corporate finance. The first one is product finance, which we typically call like FP&A, Financial Planning and Analysis Group. This is the only group which partners with the business with business of the product teams and help them run their business. So a lot of responsibilities revolve around like managing P&Ls, managing revenue forecasting, expense forecasting, any strategic decisions if they need to be made, providing like a lot of financial data insights around that. So it's around like co-partnering with your business leads and helping them run their business. So that's pretty much like the FP&A aspect of corporate finance. The second one is accounting. Any public company or even like any incorporated company, there are a lot of like fiscal responsibilities, legal responsibilities, and how the revenue needs to be booked, how the expenses need to be booked. So you need to kind of like, and it's a slightly more technical aspect of corporate finance because you need a certain educational background, like degrees in accounting, to be in that org. The third bucket within corporate finance, I would say, is like FinOps or financial operations. This is more around like operations umbrella of finance. I can give you an example of like Google. Google is a public company with lots of customers, lots of partners, like a lot of vendors who we work with. And then like it has a lot of like employees also. So we have like 100,000 employees. They need to be paid on time. And every single like 15th or bi-weekly, they need to be really like exact dollar amount. It should be matching. So you don't have any even like when it comes to people's salaries, you cannot like make mistakes in paying them. So FinOps, and also like similarly to your partners, managing all the invoices, managing the money, like you're paying out your bills. So it's a huge function, and I think like the complexity grows more and more as the companies scale big. So FinOps kind of like manages it end to end. And again, like it's a highly operations heavy role where efficiency matters the most. And then finally, the fourth category in corporate finance bucket is this function of treasury. Again, more specific to big companies than smaller companies, but big companies generate a lot of cash on a regular basis. So that cash needs to be invested out, or that cash needs to be kind of like, you need to figure out what to do with that cash, because if you keep it in the bank, then it does not generate a lot of interest. So most of these companies end up like having this treasury arm, which help companies figure out how to best invest that money, obviously with the right risk levels and whatnot. And also like hedging, foreign currency hedging will come in that arm as well. So those are kind of like the four buckets, and depending on which aspect of this corporate finance interests you, you have to kind of like you have to kind of like grow skill sets in that way, and also approach each of these functions in a particular specific way.
Wonderful. So my last question is, Vaibhav, what advice do you have for the professionals in strategy and analytics domain to be successful in their career?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough one. I would say like, again, like it's there's no right and wrong answer. Managing career is a journey in some ways. My personal kind of like philosophy here is like always think long term rather than short term. You like just be honest to yourself. Where do you stand in skill sets? Where do you stand in like what's the reality of like your own job profile, or when you're looking for roles, like you get a fair assessment of where you are. And then like if there are, and if you have certain goals, or if you want certain positions, and if you're not getting them, then I think like having a really honest assessment and filling those gaps, I think by working hard, gaining those skill sets, taking on extra projects where it's experiential, you learn, you challenge yourself, getting out of your comfort zone, and then like keep pushing. Another thing which has helped me a lot is I think like reading. I love to read a lot of books, and those books kind of like are in all domains. So especially with strategy, like when you have to be able to connect a lot of dots, reading about the industry, reading about like the technology space, I think is really helpful. So yeah, like I think I don't know like how to answer this question, but I would say just staying motivated, working hard, like taking risks, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone all the time. If it's specific to strategy, taking on projects which are around solving business problems. If you're not getting those breaks, doing 20%, getting exposure, building those connections, and then like making the move. If it's about analytics, really like pushing yourself in. It's a highly like kind of like it's kind of an academic route. So you enroll yourself in a lot of courses if you're not updated, having a genuine desire, first of all, to make a career in analytics. And then I think like going with the flow, I guess.
Thank you so much, Vaibhav, for such a lovely answer. And thank you so much for sharing your advice, expertise, and insights with us. So, now I would quickly like to share a brief story of High Counselor Inception. We are
Sure.
there three major reasons due to which most of the people find difficulty in getting advice. So lack of communication with company insiders, lack of information about company and job position, and candidates are at times not well prepared for the interview. So we solve this problem by connecting these people's how do we do. I'll just explain that. We solve this problem by connecting the people to job seekers with the company insiders. What does exactly High Counselor do? Suppose I want to get a job at Facebook. I could log into High Counselor website or mobile app, search for a current employee working at Facebook, and immediately book a phone or an email appointment for tips and career advice. So yes, you're right. You can, I'm sure attendees will gain a lot of advice from this. So you can get one-to-one coaching from someone working in our dream company. So for all attendees, if you are, our counselors work in top companies like product, technology, and consulting domains. So if that is your target industry, definitely check out highcounselor.com. So just like this webinar, we conduct webinars every week. So do not forget to sign on our platform, High Counselor platform. It will help us to keep you posted about upcoming awesome webinars.
Sure.
Fantastic.
That sounds great, actually.
Yeah, thank you. So all of our webinar recordings are available on our YouTube channel. This webinar recording will also be uploaded in next few days, and we went live also. So people, do not forget to sign on our platform and hit the bell icon here to subscribe for the upcoming videos. And if every one of you liked our webinar and the guest and the webinar with the guest speaker Webhav, so I would request you all to please share a word of mouth about High Counselor on your social media accounts. And finally, I hope you've all found this webinar helpful. We'll send you a survey link in next couple of days, and we'll be hosting events like this regularly. So please let us know what you think so that we can ensure you're getting maximum benefit and valuable information from these webinars. Thank you so much, Webber, for giving your valuable time to us and giving such lovely tips. I really loved that. I'm sure all our attendees must have loved that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
And
you, Karishma. Yeah, I think
welcome.
it has been pleasure kind of like sharing my thoughts. Um, and yeah, like I look forward to kind of like any, I think like questions which people may have, or like, yeah, I would love to kind of like just keep the dialogue alive.
Sure. And thank you so much, all our attendees as well, to attend this webinar and make it successful for us. And thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye. Good evening.
Bye. Have a good day.